I guess we'll get started. So welcome everyone to the VMware Cloud monthly webinar. Today we're going to be focusing on Oracle Cloud VMware solution. So this will be very similar to the previous sessions that we've had, where we had some introductions to VMware Cloud on AWS and Google Cloud VMware solution, but today, of course, focusing on Oracle Cloud. So my name is Phoebe Kim. I'm a senior cloud solutions architect at VMware. I'm just going to do the intro for us and talk to you a little bit about Women Who Code Cloud, and then I'll pass it off to my colleague, Jason, to go into the technical details of Oracle Cloud VMware solution. So just to talk a little bit about Women Who Code, the mission is to inspire women to excel in technology careers. So it has been built, as I guess the name suggests, for women in technology industry. But of course, it's not just limited to that. The vision is really for a world where diverse women are better represented as engineers and leaders in technology. But we have a very open community for anyone in technology careers if they want to just develop in their professional careers. The target, of course, for the organization, as it is to support and inspire women in technology, is for engineers with 2 or more years of experience, where they are already in the technology industry, but they'd like more support, maybe meet other people who are in the industry that can, provide resources for them and, help them and strengthen their influence and move up in their careers. Women in Code is an inclusive community. So, regardless of who you are, your gender identity and expression, sexual orientation, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. You can always come and join us for any of our events, any of our conversations, and you are definitely welcome. Our events, of course, are still intended to inspire women to excel in technology careers, but anyone that align with our mission and vision, of course, are welcome. And we do not tolerate any harassment of members in any form. If you want to read a little more about our code of conduct, then you can read the full version on our website. We have a little bit of we have a social event, I guess, that we have ongoing. Essentially, it's called #ApplaudHer. So what it is just to acknowledge people or women of their professional accomplishments, right? Maybe they got a job or a promotion that they've been working hard for. Maybe they're speaking at a conference or just learning something different, some different technology or different programming language, right? Or they're volunteering as one of the leaders for Women Who Code. You could submit to have do an applaud her for them. You could submit yourself as well if you'd like to share some of your accomplishment. So we're welcoming any submissions here for our social media platforms. A couple of upcoming events. So there's been an ongoing book club event where we're reading the Phoenix Project. And you can, of course, you don't have to be from the beginning, but you can still join in and, talk about the book, just spend time with other people involved in Women Who Code. And then in November, there will be another VMware Cloud monthly webinar as well. The topic is still TBD, but of course it will be announced as soon as we have a set topic, and you can definitely join that next one as well. And stay connected. You could join us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You could also check us out on our website, womenwhocode.com/cloud. So that's only really my portion about Women Who Code. So I'm going to pass it off to Jason, and he'll go into all the fun technical details about Oracle Cloud VMware solution. Jason?
All right, thank you, Phoebe. Let me share my screen here. All right, welcome everyone. So again, my name is Jason McKenzie. I'm a senior cloud solution architect at VMware. I am Phoebe's coworker, and today I have the pleasure of introducing to you the Oracle Cloud VMware solution. My particular role at VMware is to kind of focus on this particular cloud and deep dive into its technical workings and hopefully help the integration between Oracle and VMware partnership and make sure that the solution that Oracle is providing you fits the model that VMware has for them. All right. So, but before I go deep down into the Oracle world, I wanted to quickly talk about VMware's multi-cloud strategy, because without the multi-cloud strategy, without it, we don't get to the Oracle Cloud VMware solution. So what VMware's multi-cloud strategy is the idea of any cloud. So again, you probably sat through a couple other sessions around AWS, Azure Cloud, there's Google Cloud, there's VMware certified partner clouds. There's all these different clouds, right? But the idea behind any cloud or multi-cloud is that VMware is saying, you know what, no matter your directive, no matter what cloud you choose for one reason or the other, if you need to have a solid homogeneous foundation, you can put VMware out there and then not be worried about having to adopt with a particular model from any particular hyperscaler. So the goal one is to create this cloud foundation. With this cloud foundation, you get this ability to move your workloads from any cloud. When I mean any cloud, and you'll hear multi-cloud all the time when we talk about VMware and we say public cloud, private cloud, edge cloud. Essentially, all I'm trying to say is a VMware stack, right? I'm talking about vSphere, vCenter, NSXT, vSAN, as I refer to them as the usual suspects. So with this cloud foundation set, you can now have this foundation where you can move your VMs or containers or utilize Kubernetes to have your application run anywhere. And with that, if your infrastructure running anywhere, you now have this very common operations model, right? You're used to vCenter, monitoring your VMs or managing your workloads on premise. Now you can have the same operational software running or monitoring your applications running in any cloud. And this helps with training and familiarity. You don't have a AVS team, you don't have an Oracle team, you don't have a Google team, you have a VMware team. And this VMware team is used to these tools of monitoring and organizing your infrastructure, so that cuts back on overhead. And then with that, networking, right? VMware, we also virtualize networking. With a unified networking layer, we can have NSXT running in Google, Oracle, AVS, Alibaba, I don't know, all the different clouds. And again, it's a familiarity. There's this common thread of networking, and that it will help you, especially if you decide to utilize more than one cloud. And lastly, the unified developer experience, right? We're not looking to integrate with Azure. We're not looking to integrate with Oracle particularly or Google. We're looking to integrate with VMware and having that common experience for your developers, or if you're a developer, for you, that it makes it easier for you to develop your applications or help your organization get to the market faster. So here at VMware, we have something called the 5 R's. I'm going to talk about 4 of the R's, and I'm going to split the R's into 2 categories. So the first 2 R's, retain and rehost. This is a given. These are the easy ones. So the idea of utilizing VMware in multiple clouds is the idea that you retain the same security, privacy, performance that you're used to on premise. or you're used to with VMware, right? Same experience, nothing new. The rehost, the idea of the fact that you can take an environment that's on premise or in one particular cloud and move it to another cloud. Again, this could be from Oracle to Google or Google to Azure, whoever, and still not have to re-architect your application. That's a huge time saver and game changer. So those two are given. So the other two, replatform, rebuild, build or refactor. Those two, I think of them as optional. So you have VMware, you have this great platform, this great middleware running in Oracle or Azure or Google, IBM, and you're like, well, I have my application out here, but you know what? What can we do to take advantage of some of the features that are built into VMware? Maybe I want to leverage Kubernetes to improve this application and flexibility in architecture. That's an option. Now that you have VMware, you can take advantage of that. Well, how about refactor or build? Okay, you've crossed that first hurdle of getting to the cloud. Now I'm there. What can I do? Well, how about looking forward and taking that application and taking it to the next level, utilizing some of the native services that cloud provider has. So because you have VMware, because you're able to move to the cloud faster, now you're able to potentially build or refactor or even net new take advantage of those advantages of being in the cloud. So our multi-cloud approach does a couple of things. It gives you choice. As I said earlier, just think about the idea of all the different providers of cloud that are out there. I've named them over and over again. And if you look at them not as individuals, but as a whole, the whole world is your playground. All their native services that they offer are now accessible to you underneath this cloud foundation that VMware has provided for you. And what does that give you? That gives you faster time to market. It gives you faster time to migrate. It gives you your weekends back. It gives you your nights back. So when your organization says, hey, you know what, we're getting out of the data center business, how do we move to the cloud? And if you're a VMware person and you're like, well, we're already running VMware on premise, is there an option to run it in the cloud? Well, guess what? A lot of hyperscalers offer VMware as a service, and there you go. Faster time to market. And in the end, what most people who only know you as a number care about, the numbers and saving money. It will help reduce operational cost, migration costs. Again, you're not training different. You're not having to train on a different platform. You're not having to bring in different developers to redevelop or replatform your applications that are already running on-prem. It's a game changer from a cost savings, and bottom line, saving money gives promotions. So looking at multi-cloud as a homogeneous just infrastructure as a service idea is game changing. All right, so now I'm going to move into what makes Oracle special before I get into the technical stuff. So, because again, there's other providers. So first of all, one off the top, management and control. So the one thing that's pretty interesting about the Oracle Cloud VMware solution is that once you deploy it, and I'll go into the roles and responsibilities a little bit more later, but once you deploy it, it's yours. Meaning Oracle does not have access to your infrastructure or to your vSphere environment after deployment. You are giving your root passwords to your host. You are giving your initial passwords to NSX, vCenter, to your environment, and it is yours. It is fully managed. You're responsible for your lifecycle management. So for example, let's say you deploy vSphere 6.7 let's say vSphere 7 update 2. vSphere 7 update 3 was just released or announced during VMworld. hypothetically, if you deploy 7 update 2 and you're like, you know what, I'm good at update 2. I have some applications I don't feel like upgrading right now. It's in your hands. With great power comes great responsibility, I like to say, but most of the time, a lot of other hyperscalers kind of manage the host down, but in the Oracle environment, you manage the host up. OCI native services, again, it's Oracle Cloud. So they have their own native services. They have their own NFS storage. They have their own services, native services that make them unique. So with our multi-cloud strategy, let's say if you're a big Oracle service utilizer, you may pick Oracle Cloud or OCVS to deploy your workloads, or at least some of your workloads there, so that you can have access to those OCI native services. And OCI stands for Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. Optimized for government cloud. At one point, Oracle was the only cloud provider that was authorized for FedRAMP for government use. I believe AWS is now also authorized, but they were first. And the one thing about Oracle, because you have so much control, and the government loves control, it made the ideal platform for government entities to move to, because they could totally secure it without having to be concerned or worried about prying eyes or prying access. Global footprint, 30 plus Oracle regions. You've probably heard of regions before, but just Oracle's all around the world. There's one particular customer that we're working with where Oracle was the only shop in town in this particular country. They had to have their workloads on that particular running within country. So Oracle has expanded around the world. Again, massive joint install base. Again, VMware has 95% market share on virtualization. Oracle is a very popular database providing company, so huge market share there. And also OCI Fast Connect. So Oracle offers a private connection. A lot of other clouds do too, but theirs is called Fast Connect. And something that I will mention over and over again is that Oracle does not charge for ingress or egress over its private circuits. So most cloud providers charge you for egress out data transfer. Well, Oracle does not when using Fast Connect. So if you have your colo data center or your on-prem data center and you choose to use a private connection to the Oracle Cloud, you do not have to worry about data usage charges over that circuit, which a lot of people, when they migrate to the cloud, one of their concerns is keeping costs down, and most cloud providers don't charge you to put your money in or your data in, but they charge you to withdraw it, kind of like a out of a network ATM. But Oracle, if you choose to use a Fast Connect to connect your on-prem to the cloud, does not charge you for that data transfer. So again, a lot of different cloud providers out there. Oracle, bread and butter is database. So if you are looking to extend your resources to the Oracle Cloud to access some of their database native service offerings, Oracle's your choice. But again, there's other clouds that you can choose depending on what your use case is. All right. Now we're getting deeper, right? We're going to get into the Oracle Cloud VMware solution specifically. I'm a network person by training. I love my compute world, but as I progress through this webinar, I will start with compute, moving gradually into network, and we'll see how far we get in our time allotment. All right. So what exactly is the Oracle Cloud VMware solution? So Oracle Cloud VMware solution is Oracle's offering of vSphere, vSAN, NSX, and HCX. It runs on Oracle's bare metal server, on a bare metal server. And it's our partnership with Oracle to provide the users and customers with the VMware experience in the Oracle Cloud. It is on demand. It's essentially on demand infrastructure as a service. You can build an Oracle SDDC and reserve it for 1 hour up to 3 years. The caveat there is that once you commit, you're on the hook for your commitment. So kind of like signing a lease for an apartment or for a home. Once you sign that lease, you're on the hook for the length of that term of contract. So be mindful if you want to go out into the Oracle Cloud and decide to play around, is that you are signing a commitment for the infrastructure that you provision. And again, just like a lease of any sort, the shorter the term, the more it costs. The longer the term, the cheaper it is. So something to take in the mind. It is, just so you know, just out of curiosity, to provision an SDC or Oracle Cloud VMware solution, the basic requirement is a 3-node cluster, and it takes just about 2 hours and 14 minutes. I've done it a few times. So it's pretty quick compared to having to go out and provision servers. Well, first of all, procure servers, procure network equipment, procure all these things, and come up with the design. It is probably the quickest way that I know of to provision a full-on data center without much expertise. All right. So again, Oracle Cloud VMware solution is based off of VMware validated design, that it happens every day, every Friday. Myself in particular, I meet with Oracle engineering. We discuss what their plans are, what our plans are. We make sure that at least the initial deployment for our customers are validated, and that no one's straying too far off our reference architectures. Again, there's 30 regions all around the world, and it's essentially, if you can consider the OCVS just another VMware solution on another cloud provider. At the moment, the Oracle Cloud VMware solution only offers one, let's call it model or frame or type of host. So they have this bare metal server. You can see the specs for it. There's not multiple options or different types of hosts with different amounts of of storage or memory. At the moment, there's only one flavor. So depending on your use case, you might have to look at your lowest common denominator. If you need more RAM versus more storage, you might need to, mix and match the number of hosts. Right now in Oracle, you can deploy a 3-node cluster all the way up to a 64-node cluster. I probably wouldn't go with a 64-node cluster. I would probably try and do multiple SDDCs or multiple environments and break up my infrastructure across multiple locations. But if you really want to go 64 nodes, you could. All more power to you. But I probably would not do that. They are looking roadmap down the way to offer smaller clusters just for DevOps. So let's say, for example, you want to test out, like myself, test out a feature or functionality, test out connecting via VPN or Fast Connect, or doing something just from a non-production standpoint. They're looking at offering smaller clusters, but right now there's 3-node minimum with these hosts as your option. So coming back to the responsibility model again, it's pretty cool that with the cloud, with Oracle Cloud VMware solution, is that you have full control over your environment and no one else does. If you're looking for something that, again, you can decide when you want to upgrade, when you want to take maintenance, when you want to do or want to change the vSwitch or the networking behind, or at least the virtual networking behind your host, it's all you. You can do that. Oracle does take responsibility for replacing failed hardware. of course, monitoring data center access from a security standpoint. It provides the infrastructure as a service. Essentially, it provides the bare metal host and your VMware licensing from a vSphere, NSX, ACX perspective. And it provides you the public internet access to use for VPN, or it also provides you with, again, the Fast Connect Direct service if you want to connect on-prem directly. But for the most part, Oracle, once you deploy your SCDC, is hands-off. And then in the background, they are working with VMware to make sure that customers are able to do what they want to do with the infrastructure that they've deployed. So, going deeper. Just like every cloud provider, Oracle has infrastructure all around the world. They have commercial regions, and there's government regions. In the government regions, only government infrastructure is provisioned, and commercial, only public sector or non-commercial infrastructure is provisioned. When you go into when you go into Oracle, there's a logical layout, and then there's a physical layout. So within OCV Oracle Cloud, everything's broken up into tenancies. Then a tenancy can be broken further up into a compartment. And then there's also realms. Realms are essentially the government or commercial separation. And within those tenancies or compartments, you have resources. And resources are location dependent. So for example, a region is a physical place. You can't change that. Availability domains also, you can think of availability domains as data centers. Those are physical places. Fault domains, services, all these things are physical, are specific to a particular place. So let's pick a region. So we're gonna say Ashburn, Virginia. It is a region, a location in the United States. Within that region, there is a data center, and also I'm sure what some other clouds call them, but in this case, a data center is called an availability domain. And within that data center, within that region, you can have multiple data centers. So every region that Oracle has at least 3 data centers. And within each data center, there's a fault domain. And consider a fault domain, let's call it a row of equipment. It could be a hall. And from domains, and let's say it would be the other row. Availability domain has 3 fault domains.
You're breaking up a bit there for me. Can you hear me?
The internet. Can you hear me now?
It's breaking up a bit. I don't know if it's just me. Can everyone hear him okay? I think it's frozen.
A bit frozen for me too. Oh, I see you're back, Jason.
Okay, yeah, you're back now.
All right, can you guys hear me again?
Yeah.
Yep, you sound good.
All right, sorry about that.
All good.
All right, share to share. All right. All right. Everybody still there, right?
Yeah, we see the presenter view though. Not the
Okay.
not the presentation.
All right. Back.
Yep, looks
Okay.
good.
All right. Where was I? I was talking about my data centers, my fault domains. Okay. So again, we have our data centers, we have our fault domains within our data center, and that's our physical infrastructure. That's the general layout of every region that Oracle has. All right. So going deeper. So we have our data centers, and on top of our data centers, there is something called a virtual cloud network. Other clouds refer to them as VPCs, or your virtual private cloud. So Oracle refers to this network as a virtual cloud network. And this is the logical boundaries of our Oracle Cloud infrastructure. And that's later on, we'll talk about deploying the Oracle Cloud VMware solution within this virtual cloud network. But this virtual cloud network is the boundary of all the Oracle Cloud infrastructure that we'll deploy in this particular instance. So the Oracle Cloud Network has routing capability. To be honest with you, it's pretty much magic. The way that the virtual cloud network routes or allows things to talk to each other is hidden from us. This is an Oracle Cloud infrastructure feature. So is there BGP? Is there OSPF? Is there, I don't know, ISIS? What's behind how the virtual cloud network routes is Oracle's business. I don't know. All I know and all I care about is that it's able to route traffic between devices that are attached to it, and it's stretched across all the availability domains. So within each availability domain, there are subnets. And a subnet can either be in one availability domain, and it's attached to the virtual cloud network, or it can span all three availability domains. What's important about the subnets is that each subnet has a firewall rule or firewall rules and routing rules associated to it. And I haven't mentioned it already, but Oracle works on a whitelist methodology that when something needs to communicate with something, you have to allow it, and everything else is denied by default. And normally, once you deploy this virtual cloud network, and then you deploy subnets, then you can deploy Oracle Cloud Infrastructure and attach it to those subnets. So if I was going to deploy a Oracle virtual machine, I would deploy it, and then I would give it an IP address, and I would associate it with one of these networks. But in this case, this demo or this webinar, it's about Oracle Cloud VMware Solution. So I'll move on to how Oracle Cloud VMware Solution integrates into the network. So as I mentioned early on, Oracle Cloud VMware Solution is deployed on Oracle's bare metal servers. And that server needs network connectivity. But the subnets that I mentioned earlier are layer 3. And Oracle Cloud VMware Solution relies on layer 2 subnets. So there's not just subnets within the Oracle Cloud, but there's also VLANs. What Oracle does when you pick to choose when you deploy its solution, and we'll go into when we get to the network section, we'll go deeper into that. But what happens is that you say, okay, I have my virtual cloud network. It's a /16, a 10.10.10 slash 0 10.10/16. I have this VCN, and now I'm going to provision my Oracle Cloud VMware solution in it. It will tell you, or ask you for a subnet where it will then subdivide into multiple VLANs for your environment. But anyways, so we have these VLANs, and then we have our host connected to these VLANs. When you deploy the Oracle Cloud VMware solution, you get vCenter and NSX Manager, more control plane. Well, these VMs need access to the network too. Well, they get an uplink into one of these 7 VLANs. And then those 7 VLANs are provisioned out of the virtual cloud network VCN address space. Layer 2 subnets, in general, unless you run some special technology or go out of your way, typically do not span a data center. Remember, we're in this Oracle Cloud VMware solution is in this data center, and I guess I forgot to mention, Oracle Cloud VMware solutions do not span multiple data centers. You can deploy multiple Oracle Cloud VMware solutions in multiple data centers or multiple availability domains, but traditionally, or at the moment, they cannot span multiple availability domains. So what happens is that you deploy a Oracle Cloud VMware solution in one availability domain, it gets a set of VLANs, and if you want to deploy another Oracle Cloud VMware solution, you would then provision another set, in this case, 7 VLANs. They could all come from this VCN network, but they would only exist in this availability domain. So this is how you would grow your SCDCs if you wanted to deploy multiple ones in OCI. Now, Internet Gateway. So one of the responsibilities of Oracle is to provide you with internet. Well, in the Oracle Cloud VMware solution or OCI, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, there's something called an Internet Gateway. And what the Internet Gateway is essentially you're out to the internet. So what happens is that when you provision a resource within the Oracle Cloud, you can say, there's a little checkbox, and you say, hey, I want this thing to be able to talk out to the internet. And behind the scenes, kind of one of those VCN magic features I mentioned earlier, Oracle will assign that device a public IP address. If that device does not need to have direct internet access, if it's okay to be behind a NAT, there's also a NAT gateway that provides the same sort of internet access, but masking the private IP that the VM or the infrastructure has behind the NAT. And those gateways are connected to the virtual cloud network. Going deeper, now let's look at one particular SDDC. When you go into the Oracle Cloud portal, there's a bunch of stuff that's native to the Oracle Cloud VMware solution. The Oracle infrastructure. But the actual windows or configurations for OCI, Oracle Cloud infrastructure, Oracle Cloud VMware solution is essentially a service within the Oracle Cloud. So you have to navigate to that within the Oracle Cloud. So here I'm showing this is the region I'm in, this is the menu I'm in, and this is the SDDC, SEC that I'm looking at. I can see that this particular SCDC is running 6.7 update 3. I know which data center it's in, which availability domain. I know my VLANs. And here at the top, as Oracle has grown has gotten better and have realized that there's certain features or things that customers are looking to implement over and over again, they have these wizards that help you configure things quickly. So let's say you've deployed your SDDC in the cloud and you're like, well, I want to now connect this to my on-premises SDDC. Well, there's a wizard for that. Well, I want to connect this to some Oracle service that I want to utilize in my cloud. There's a wizard for that. So over time, Oracle has gotten better and better at providing these wizards that I refer to them as to do these tasks that are requested over and over again. These wizards are great learning tools because they are not doing anything special from a sense that something that you couldn't do manually or you couldn't automate through scripting. It's just that it's a consolidated place to do all the things that you need to do to complete that particular task. So when you run any of these wizards, you can then, it'll show you a summary of all the changes that they're making. And then you can say, oh, I can do that. Or I don't want to do that. Let me cancel and just only do a certain piece of the workflow of that particular wizard. So it's pretty cool. I use the configure connectivity to your on-premises network one all the time. So when you deploy an SDDC or Oracle Cloud VMware solution instance in the Oracle Cloud, as I mentioned earlier, you're signing a lease, essentially. You're doing a hourly up to a 3-year. And when you go to terminate your SDDC, there's no going back. So again, if you want to test this and you deploy a 3-year a cluster with a 3-year contract, and you say, oh, you know what? I don't want this anymore, and I delete it. Guess what? You're still on the hook for 3 years. So this is just showing that you can quickly build one. You can build an SDDC in just over 2 hours. You can also tear it down in a couple minutes, but you have to be cognizant of your lease with Oracle. So in the same console, if you look at the bottom, scrolling down, you can see the actual hosts that the SDDC consists of. So in this particular case, I have 3 hosts. If I wanted to add an additional host to my cluster, I would do it here. It's up to you. That additional host will then join into that additional commitment. So let's say you have a 3-year and you have 3 nodes and you want to add an additional node, that host would join that 3-year commitment. It's not going to be like, oh, well, this host was to provision 6 months in, and you're not going to have that one for an additional 6 months. It's just, it joins that initial commitment. But this is where I would see which hosts are a part of my SDDC or my Oracle Cloud VMware solution. Oracle, just like any other cloud, has their own infrastructure. You can deploy their virtual machines, run your applications directly on their infrastructure, just like any other hyperscaler. What this screenshot is showing is that because OCVS runs on their infrastructure, when you go into the portal where you can see their compute infrastructure, you will also see the hosts. So in this case, there's my 3 hosts, and there are some additional VMs that were deployed as part of, in this case, there's a jump box that's deployed here, and they have an Active Directory server. All right. So you can see in the menu also that the availability domain, where that infrastructure is deployed, is here. You can also see which fault domain. So if let's imagine fault domains are a row of equipment. In this case, when you deploy an Oracle Cloud VMware solution, it always deploys the nodes across multiple fault domains. So in the case, if you did a 4-node cluster, in that case, obviously, one node will end up on the same fault domain as another. So you might have 2 on the same fault domain. So you might want to, if you're deploying in the Oracle Cloud, you might want to think about that. You might want to, my OCD says always in threes, so I could span my nodes across all 3 fault domains so that nothing, I really don't have a single point of failure or 1/3 point of failure. I don't think that makes sense, but I'm just saying. But yeah, you can see where the infrastructure is deployed and how it's spread out. Digging down deeper into one particular node, that's the node name. We can see more information about that particular node, which availability domain, which fault domain, where it's just a region. Everything in Oracle has an OCID, like an ID that identifies it within the Oracle environment, the compartment. There's more information digging down deeper into some of the characteristics of what it looks like in the Oracle Cloud. The primary NIC, so each host has a management NIC that connects into the virtual cloud network. We can see its IP address. We can see if there's any additional security that's being applied to that physical NIC itself, the subnet that that particular NIC is attached to. The Oracle nodes or the bare metal servers run iSCSI or as a boot volume. So we can see that this is its boot drive, that's the firmware. Again, all the particulars of the physical infrastructure, because in this current view, we are just looking at what Oracle sees, and it's just the physical infrastructure. Here again, here's our shape again. That's that model, 52 cores, our bandwidth, our memory, how much space on that particular host. And more information about the physical infrastructure. All right. What time check? Where are we at? Okay.
We have like 12 minutes.
All right. Cool. Thanks, Phoebe. So moving on, the network layer. So first of all, I mentioned the virtual cloud network is this, consider it a router that you don't know how it routes, but it has routing capabilities. So I would say the most difficult part about being a Cisco person, particularly, that not understanding quite how they do things in the background kind of bothers me, but it works. So when you're working in the networking space of the virtual cloud network, it's a little different, but like any networking, you get used to it. Subnets, they can be private or public. And what that means, on one of those slides where I was showing the AD-wide subnets and the subnets that spanned, well, the subnets that were in one particular AD or ones that span across all ADs. So those subnets can be public or private. And what that means, and it's easier to explain with Oracle infrastructure actually. So if I deploy an Oracle VM in my virtual cloud network, I can deploy it in a subnet classified as public or a subnet classified as private. And what that means is that if I put this VM in a quote unquote public subnet, there's a checkbox. And that checkbox says this VM will get a private IP address based off your virtual cloud network, and Oracle will give it a public IP address that it pulls out of its pools of IP addresses. Private IP addresses, when I deploy an Oracle Cloud infrastructure into something that's a private subnet, there's not an option to give it a public IP address. But if it does still need internet access, it can use the NAT gateway to get out to the internet. There's lots of gateways or routers, I like to think of them, or layer 4 through 7 devices in the Oracle Cloud. I've mentioned internet gateways already. I've mentioned NAT gateways. There's the local peering gateway, what a local peering gateway is used for. So if I have a deployment, a VCN or a if I have a VCN and I have an SDDC and that VCN, that virtual cloud network, and let's say I have another Oracle VCN that is in another region somewhere else, and I want to peer those two regions, I would use a local peering gateway kind of as the two endpoints between those environments. There is a dynamic routing gateway. The dynamic routing gateway it's almost like the VCN, but you have control over the dynamic routing gateway. So when the use cases for a dynamic routing gateway would be if I am connecting my on-premises data center to the cloud or to Oracle Cloud, I would peer my firewall or my layer 3 device or my edge device with a dynamic routing gateway. Or if I am doing any sort of private connection, if I'm going to connect the fast connector, their private circuit from my on-premises to the cloud, I would peer that with the DRG or the dynamic routing gateway. And the service network gateway is a gateway that is used to peer your virtual cloud network to Oracle services. So if I'm going to utilize some of the Oracle native services from for use in my VCN or for my network, I would deploy a service network gateway and use that to connect to the native services. There are route table entries and security lists. I'll do security list first. Again, Oracle operates on a whitelist model. If you don't say it can talk to me, then it denies it. Route tables, as long as the device exists within the virtual cloud network and the security rule says that it can talk to it, it will route, it will get there, it will talk to it. If something exists outside of the Oracle world, the VCN, and you can kind of consider your Oracle Cloud VMware solution existing outside of the VCN, it's kind of its own little bubble. You need route tables to tell something that's in the VCN that you need to go here to talk to something within the Oracle Cloud VMware solution. So as you start to deploy and work with the Oracle Cloud, you've really become quite inept to dealing with the different route tables and security lists, because when things don't work, most likely it's because you didn't say it was allowed to talk to something, or in the case of OCVS or Oracle Cloud VMware Solution, you didn't tell the VCN that, hey, this thing lives inside the Oracle Cloud VMware Solution, and this is how you get to it. So when you deploy the Oracle Cloud VMware Solution, you tell it that I'm going to deploy a vSphere 6.7 environment, and it makes you tell it, okay, what subnet or how am I going to subdivide your VCN for the networks that are required for your VCN. So in this particular environment, this is for vSphere 6.7. So what happens when you go through the GUI, it says, give me a /22 at least, so that I can take those subnets and divide them up for all the things that your environment will need. And when you do that, it deploys all those subnets, all these layer 2 subnets for you. All these layer 2 VLANs. It also deploys a subnet, but this subnet is essentially for the SDDC operations, for the provisioning of the host, and it's not used for normal day-to-day operation. It's a subnet that's required for the provisioning of their hardware, but what's important are these subnets, are these VLANs that are provisioned. It gives them a VLAN tag. VLAN tags are randomly picked. If you have another VCN with another set of subnets in it, The VLAN tags could be the same, or multiple of these could show up again, but VLAN tags are specific to that VCN. They do not carry over between VCNs. So here are the subnets on a typical deployment. Everything, because this is kind of pre-provisioned for you, everything has a place to go. So our vCenter, consider this subnet our management subnet. So vCenter gets connected to it. NSX Manager connects to it. HCX Manager gets connected to it. All the HCX appliances get connected to it, plus the connected to vSAN. So what I'm showing here is that, without going into too much detail around the sizing of the subnets and how everything is connected, how everything's IP'd, is that during the deployment process, Oracle takes care of all this for you. All you have to do is tell it, here's my /22, here's my address space. Remember, and this applies to all clouds, you want to provision this when you do subnetting in the cloud, you want to make sure it doesn't exist somewhere else. But if you have that under control, you want to tell it, hey, Oracle, here's my /22 for a vSphere 6.7 in this example, give me the subnets. So it takes the liberty of provisioning these subnets for you. You could do them manually, but the wizard does quite a great job of doing it, so I would probably rely on the wizard. Once you deploy your SDDC, your Oracle Cloud VMware solution, as I said earlier, it's your baby. You go to the Oracle Cloud VMware solution dashboard, and this gives you all the information you need to access your environment. vCenter, NSXT Manager, HCX Manager. There's the IP address, there's the activation keys, there's all your passwords. Everything is here. You only have access to it. You lose it, you change this, it's on you. So if you decide to integrate any of these things with role-based access controls or any sort of, that's up to the customer. Oracle can't help you. Again, I want to drive this home. Inbound data transfer is free. Outbound transfer is free. Now there is a 10 terabyte. I think this is really practically free, but for the most part, inbound, outbound is free. If you go over 10 terabyte, you got to pay some pennies, but I'm sure if you're doing that much data transfer, the pennies are okay. All right, if you want to learn more, I'm sorry that was a lot in a short amount of time and my internet messed up, but if you want to learn more, just recently I released an ebook on getting started to the Oracle Cloud VMware solution. Go check that out. Go check out our Oracle Cloud VMware solution site at VMware.com. We have hands-on labs where you can go through and deploy your own SDDC. We have some technical resources which we are constantly updating on the VMware Cloud Tech Zone. Oracle is also offering free training and certification on Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. This is huge, right? They're giving away their IP for anyone who wants to go learn about Oracle Cloud and get certified in it. So that's awesome. And you can also contact Oracle Cloud VMware Solutions, Oracle Cloud VMware Solutions sales at VMware.com with additional questions. And yeah. Thank you guys for sitting here. Whoops, clicked the wrong button. Thank you guys for sitting here and listening to me tell you about the Oracle Cloud VMware solution. I do not have my Twitter handle up here, but I'm at YAskYIT on Twitter. You can find me on